The city at night was all black water and copper light, lanterns pooling on the wharves and the red keep set like a jagged tooth against the sky. Wind came off the narrow sea with a sharpness that stung the lips and set banners snapping along the battlements. Eddard Stark stood in the shadow of an archway and watched the glow travel across the harbor like the tail of a comet. The bells of the Great September had fallen silent when the king's last breath rattled out, and yet the city had not slept. King's Landing never slept, and tonight it muttered to itself like a fevered man. "Ser Barristan," he said at length, "we do it now." The Lord Commander's hair was snow-white, his face time-carved and weathered as river stone. In the darkness his eyes were hard coins. "My Lord Protector," he answered, the honorific falling with the weight of duty. "The Lord of the City Watch has been summoned." "Janos Slint will balk," Ned said. "He will obey," Barristan said, as if that might make it so. "Or he will be replaced." The parchment at Ned's belt seemed to burn against him, though it was cool under his fingers. The king's hand had pressed its seal there not an hour before the boar's tusks took his life for good. Not a will in truth, no matter what he called it, for Robert had never been one for letters and legality, but words enough to carry law upon them. Eddard Stark to be regent and protector of the realm until the king's heir came of age. Eddard had read it twice to be sure. He had not imagined the authority those words carried. He had asked for a quill. He had struck out the name Joffrey and written heir, only heir. The king, too weak to argue, had laughed a little and said, "You're stubborn as mother," and the last of Robert's mirth had gone with the breath. He thought of that now, the heavy rasp and the smell of blood and wine in the royal chamber, the flies held at bay by attendants with fans, the sweat glossing the king's brow. Ned wished, in a boy's foolish fashion, for the clean wind of Winterfell, the quiet of snow weeping off pine boughs, Catelyn's voice in the dark. That world had been cut away from him as surely as a limb. What remained lay before him. Stone, iron, unquiet men. Boots ran across flagstones behind them, and a breathless functionary with a chain of office clattering at his neck bowed too many times and bubbled too many words. Barristan's hand rebuked him without a sound. Janos Slint came after, in a slow square march, his belly outthrust, his nostrils flared with important breath. Two captains were at his flanks, their cloaks the muddy brown of the city watch with the gold accents catching torchlight. Their hands rested on the pommels of their swords as if to keep the hilts from fleeing. "My Lord Stark summons," Slint announced, as though reciting a verdict. "And here I am. I am sorry for the king. May the mother hold him close." "Thank you," Ned said. "I will speak plainly, Lord Slint, and quickly. Close every gate that opens to city or sea. Close them now and do not open them again until I command it. No ships out, no ships in. Set sentries on the roads and river. I want your men on the Mud Gate, the King's Gate, the Lion Gate even more. Double watches on all. I want Lannister colors watched with particular care and any man in Lannister livery disarmed. There must be no fighting in the streets. We will do this cleanly if we can." Slint's eyes flicked toward Barristan Selmy, measuring, then back to Ned. "A serious business," he said. "The king's business," said Barristan. "The will of his grace." Slint shifted, and his glance slid like oil. Eddard felt the tug of an old weariness. He had little coin to buy this man with, and less taste for it. He would barter duty against ambition if he must. This was the game they all played here, with smaller lives for tokens. "You know the city, Lord Slint," Ned said. "You know where trouble brews. There will be gold for the men who keep peace, and heads for those who break it." "Peace," Slint mused. "A fine thing." He sampled the word again, then nodded once, and again with more force. "It shall be as you say. I will set men at once." "One more matter," Ned said. "Ser Jacelyn Bywater. I want him made your second. Tonight." Slint's mouth pinched. Bywater has always thought himself too fine for a watchman. Then it is time he learned the honor of the post. Barristan put in, smooth as still water. "He has a man's courage and a soldier's discipline. The city needs that." Slint chewed at some thought with tiny movements of his plump jaw and then shrugged a thick shoulder. as if sloughing off misgiving like a snake's skin. As you say, I will send for him. Send for him and keep him close, Ned said. And be sure you keep yourself close as well, Lord Slint. If I send for you, I expect you within the hour, or I will have a different lord of the city watch by sunset tomorrow. The man's face went red and then white again. For a heartbeat, Ned expected defiance. Instead, Slint nodded jerkily. As you command, my lord. They moved as if the words had broken a spell. Orders flew like crows from hand to hand. Men took them, turned, ran. Slint's boots clapped their hollow cadence away down the corridor, his captains half jogging to keep his pace. Barristan breathed out and then in again, a quiet bellows. That is one gate shut, the old knight said. Many more. They will move now, Ned said. I have caged them. They will claw. The Queen's men were already in motion. Ned watched it ripple through the city from the red roofs of the Street of Silk to the black-gapped windows of the Street of Steel. Watched how lamplight shifted as doors opened then slammed again and shutters were struck and barred. How the slant of lantern glow changed on cobbles when honest men turned their steps toward home for fear of what the night might birth. In the Red Keep, courtiers ate in their slippers and whispered with mouths full, or rose and glided away on felted feet, the little insects of the court skittering for cracks. He wondered who would run to whom, who to Varys, who to Littlefinger, who to the Queen. He had never been a hunter of men's hearts. Wolves run by the nose and the ear, by the earth's soft speak. His kind of cunning was no coin they valued here. In Maegor's holdfast the torches flared and died and flared again. Cersei Lannister stood beneath a carved lintel with her lion hair loose and a fur thrown negligently over her shoulders, as if the cold troubled her no more than propriety. Joffrey was beside her, long-limbed for all his scant years, his mouth already showing the pinch of cruelty and contempt that had so marred his handsome face. Tommen rubbed sleepy eyes. Myrcella watched with a grave absorption that only made her look more like a doll. Lord Stark, the Queen said and smiled. It was the kind of smile the cat gives the canary. How good of you to come. I hear my lord husband is dead. We are widowed together. You are widow and mother, Ned said, and heard in his voice the northern ice that always came when he spoke to her. And I am protector of the realm. Her eyes flicked to the parchment when he brought it out, to the great bloom of red wax and the stag head in its center. Lancel Lannister, pale and graceful, looked as if he might faint. Pycelle tottered forward, and with one ropey hand trembled until the seal lay close to his nose. Ned waited until the Grand Maester had done peering and whispering. He waited until Cersei was bored with the pretense of ignorance. So, she said, letting the word drag, protector of the realm. For my son. For the king's heir, Ned said. She barked a laugh then, wild and sudden, and for a moment he saw the steel behind the beauty, the blade glint in the unsheathed mirth. You should learn the names of your own household, Lord Stark. My son's name is Joffrey. Ned did not blink. Tomorrow at dawn, in the throne room, I will read the will and declare the heir. You will come, my lady, you and your children. You will do nothing of the sort. She stepped nearer to him, and the fur slid off her shoulder with a whisper. He had to fight not to look at the pale hollow of her collarbone, the smooth skin there that had undone men less reckless than him. You are far from your snows. This is King's Landing, and its law is the same law as in the north, he said gently. Is it? Her eyes glittered. We will see. The door admitted someone like a shadow. Varys, draped in soft colors, moved as if he had never in his life disturbed a grain of dust. He folded into a bow and murmured something about grief. Eddard thought of ravens, black with bright eyes. Some took crops, some carried messages. All were flesh and bone and hunger. It was easy to forget. Lord Stark, the eunuch said, warm as a fire that could not catch. Such sad times. His grace is with the gods now. He is, Ned said, and he has left his grace behind. Varys offered, eyes sliding to Joffrey, who had grown bored enough to pick at something in his nose with studied insolence. The folk of the city look to their young king. They look to a crown, said Eddard. and to the one the law sets beneath it. Ah, said Varys, which meant everything and nothing. It began with the gates. Ned watched men spill out of the armories and the barracks and flow through the city with cudgels and halberds and torch staves, gold cloaks flaring like sparks in the wind. From Tower Gate to Old Gate, from Fish Market Gate to River Gate, iron came crashing down in the grooves of stone. At the Mud Gate, the hinges shrieked so loud some men clapped their hands to their ears and crows rose like blown soot from the piers. At the King's Gate, men in crimson tried to force their way through the closing portals with the flats of their swords, and Jacelyn Bywater himself, black of beard and grim of eye, put a spear haft in a man's belly and folded him over it without a word. The King's Harbor emptied of traffic and the masts stood like a winter wheat field, tight-packed, tall, motionless. In the Iron Gate, where the hand of the city reached in to the Red Keep, Ned set Stark men on the inner posts and Bywater's men on the outer. There would be no escape that way tonight. He expected the strike to fall with speed. He had blocked the Queen's hands and feet, but she still had teeth. He sent men for Littlefinger and for Peter's keys to the treasury. He sent men for Pycelle and his account of births. He sent men to the Sept to find the High Septon sleeping and wake him to pray. He sat a while with Barristan in the armory and imagined how each of those men would betray him and how he might use the betrayal. Catelyn's eyes rose in his mind then, gray and steady. "Do not make yourself alone," she had told him once, in the deep winter at Winterfell, when his temper had driven even the servants to disappear like ghosts at his approach. "This is not the world you came from. You are flint in a room full of tinder." He had laughed at her then, a little, and then kissed her mouth to stop the words. The memory warmed him now. After a long time, the door scraped again. "Littlefinger," Ned said. Peter Baelish had the look of a man dragged by his own neck from a bed, and yet also the look of a man entirely composed in any bed or street or council chamber where he might be found. His mockery was a perfume faint on the air. One could not help but catch it, even when one did not care for the scent. "Lord Stark," he murmured, "one is tempted to ask if you had a pleasant evening." "I will have your keys," Ned said. "How many do you require?" "All," Ned said, and offered his hand. Baelish smiled, the kind of smile that showed his teeth as a courtesy. "How dull," he said, and from inside the sleeve of his night robe a chain of keys glittered into his fingers and dropped into Ned's palm with the light chime of thin metal. "I believe Varys keeps some of his own. I've always thought it charming. This city, how we all share alike." "Thank you." Ned put the keys in Barristan's hand. Baelish drifted closer, and his voice grew softer. "And what are we purchasing with such keys?" His mouth tilted, mocking. "The loyalty of the Watch? That was my thought as well, once. But you do it without consulting me. I am wounded." "The Watch belongs to the city," Ned said. "To the king." "And which is which?" said Littlefinger very sweetly. Ned looked at him. "I will read the will at dawn. Be there, or be gone, Peter. Go down to the cellars by the river if you're gonna scuttle. I have set men on the gates." The sweet look went away, and in its place was the knife edge of something true and thin. "If you would have listened to me in the first place," Littlefinger murmured, just feeling his way along the words, "you would not be, yes, you would not be Lord Eddard Stark at all." "I see. Very well, my lord. I will come hear your reading, since I love a story and live for the end of them." When he had slipped away, Barristan said, "I wish I had his head on a spike." "After the Queen's," Ned said, and then, because he was a better man than that and wished to keep being one, added, "After her guilt is proved." "It is proved to me," Barristan said softly, "but I know the law, and I know that the realm is a hedge of thorns around that law, and the right bearers are the ones who bleed to make a path." Dawn came up over the city like a dirty coin, pale and worm-browned where the gulls and kites had pecked it. The bells woke belatedly at sunrise, and the people came with the bells, their faces still shiny with sleep and the clothes they had pulled on in the half-light throne askew. The throne room filled and filled, and the lesser lords and great knights and merchants with fat purses and the gray phantoms that were the uppermost commoners pressed toward the dais and the clatter of the Iron Throne's shadows. Ned climbed the steps. He had sat in the chair once before, and his back had remembered the bite of it for hours after. Now he stood before it. Barristan was at his shoulder, and behind rash men in stark gray and city watchmen in gold and brown stood at intervals along the walls. Cersei came, and with her Joffrey in a black doublet sewn with golden thread, and Tommen in green, and Myrcella's hair braided like a coronet. Lancel trailed them, and the last to slip in before the doors shut was Varys, who seemed to drift as pollen does. He could feel the crowd's breath on him. He could feel the way the Iron Throne made men's eyes hot and greedy, as if it were a feast set just beyond taste and hunger. He took out the parchment. He did not look at Cersei when he broke the seal. He did not look at Littlefinger either, who leaned at the back wall and watched with that bright, mocking stillness he wore when he meant to move fast. "This is the will and command of Robert Baratheon," Ned said, and his voice cut the room cleanly. "King of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Shield of his people. The king bids me, Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, to serve as regent and protector of the realm until such time as his heir shall come of age." He let the words hang, and let their old, hard truth settle down on the room like a frost that would never thaw. Joffrey stiffened. Cersei's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Read the name Lord Stark," she called. "There is no name," Ned said. "Only the word heir." "Then I shall supply it," Cersei said brightly. "Joffrey, come forward." "Come, sweetling." He put the parchment away. "No. I have looked into the matter of the king's children. I have had the book of lineages brought forth and read. I have done what the law and the honor of my office command. The king left no trueborn issue. It made a sound when he said it. Not a spoken word, but a cracked inhale of breath all around him. Someone dropped a ring. The ring rolled and rolled and rolled, and then fetched up somewhere beneath the dais. Cersei's color burned. He had expected her to rage, to flick a glance for the men she had placed for just such moment. He had placed his own men there first. His own habit of bringing a slow hand to a sudden sword had nearly gotten him killed before. He had learned. He had done as Renly had urged, too late to help Renly's vanity, but in time for the city. Lancel Lannister swayed like a reed. "Lies," he whispered, as if trying the shape of the word. "Lies." "Your Grace," Ned said to the High Septon, who stood with eyes half-lidded between two acolytes at the foot of the dais. "The faith has recorded the marriages of kings for 300 years, and we know the dates of all their children as well. Look on these children." He gestured gently, as if to keep wind from breaking them. "They are golden, golden as Lannister gold, every one. The Baratheon seed breeds black. It is known. The book is there should any doubt." Cersei laughed then, a little broken laugh. "A book," she said. "You would unmake my children with a book?" "I would not unmake them," Ned said. "I would name them what they are. The Queen's bastards. I would place them under the protection of the crown. They will be safe. You will be held to account for treason." She did not try to run. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw a dozen ways to die, all of them slow. "I warned you once," she whispered. He thought she might be thinking of the godswood, of the cool shade, the sound of leaves moved by an honest breeze. "You wear your honor like a coat of mail, and a coat of mail slows a man who would run." "I do not run," Ned said, and raised a hand. The gold cloaks moved first. They did not draw their blades. They stepped up and around and between, and set their halberd staves across the Queen's path, and the swords at their belts stayed quiet. The Lannister men in crimson jerked hands to hilts. Their faces changed when Bywater's men appeared behind them. A dozen of Ned's guard flowed from the dais like shadows. Barristan's blade was bare without ever seeming to be drawn. "Do not," Ned said, and he spoke as he would have to a hound that wanted very badly to bite. "Do not. There will be no blood here." Blood, though, had its own mind. A Lannister knight near the Queen cursed and shoved a watchman hard. The man stumbled, caught himself, and brought his pommel up into the knight's jaw so quickly it seemed as if the blow had sprung from the floor. The knight sagged with a grunt. Before the moment could turn, Barristan's voice cracked like a whip. "Hold!" he snapped. "In the king's name." "In the king's name," Ned took up, and then, because this thing would not belong to Joffrey, not now, not ever. "In the name of King Stannis Baratheon, first of his name, I, Eddard Stark of Winterfell, regent and protector of the realm, declare Cersei of House Lannister under arrest for high treason and foul sin, and her children as wards of the crown. So sworn, so done." "What king?" someone breathed. Varys's eyes had gone eyelid thin and keen as a fish's in dark water. "By all the laws of the realm," Ned said. "Robert's eldest brother is his heir where there is no trueborn issue. Stannis of House Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, is king." The words in the throne room grew wild and then quiet and then wild again, like birds under a net. Joffrey tried to speak and could not, his mouth opening and closing, a fish gaping on air. Tommen began to cry. Myrcella stood very still and watched Ned with huge eyes. Cersei's face had become a mask of cold ivory. "Take them gently," Ned said, though his own jaw had gone iron hard. "Ser Barristan, you will assume command of the Kingsguard and keep the children in honor and safety. Ser Boros, Ser Meryn, you will obey him, or you will be stripped of your white cloaks and branded. Lord Slint, escort the queen to rooms prepared. She is not to be harmed or spoken to by any man save myself, the Lord Commander, and her confessor." "And I?" said Littlefinger, ever soft. "Where would you have me, Lord Stark?" "Far away," Ned said without looking at him. The queen passed with the proud glide of a woman who had learned how to walk in chains without letting them clink. She turned her head once at the door, just enough to brush Ned with the slice of her gaze. "You will die for this," she said, with such gentle certainty that it felt, for a heartbeat, like prophecy. Ned let breath out slowly. The Iron Throne loomed like a mountain behind him, all knives and shadow and sharp old words hammered into iron. He felt those words at his back like pricks. When he walked away, he did not turn to it, and some part of the crowd sighed as though a play had ended too soon. The raven Davos Seaworth held on his arm beat its wings once and then hunched down again into a black, glossy array of discontent. Dragonstone was born from fire and sea, and so the wind sang here differently, moving around the broken spires and old carved towers with a keening like an old woman's. Davos had always liked the sound for the way it reminded him that the world was older and bigger than any one man's troubles. "Read it," Stannis said. The parchment had the Baratheon seal and the square, uncompromising hand of Eddard Stark in the lines. Davos did as he was bid, his voice steady. He had learned to read on Stannis's insistence, peering at letters on nights when he would rather have slept. His candle guttering and his stump aching where the last joints of 4 fingers were gone. Stannis had taken those fingers himself for smuggling and then made him a knight for saving Storm's End. It was the sort of justice Stannis handed out, terrible and true as a north wind. Davos loved him for it, though he had never troubled the Lord with the word love. And by this authority, Davos finished. "I declare before gods and men that the true king is Stannis of House Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone. This is made known in the throne room at King's Landing, on the dawn following King Robert's death. I, Eddard Stark, regent and protector, command that your grace come to the city and be crowned according to the law." Wind moved the torches, throwing the faces into different reliefs. Celis Florent watched from a chair, her long face all righteousness and lemon sour. Axel Florent stood near her with his heavy-lidded gaze, counting the crowns he could smell in any wind. Maester Cresson leaned upon his staff and regarded the parchment as one does a snake one knows to be harmless but still cannot help but watch. "Protector," Stannis said, and the word came out flat. He took the parchment and read it once, then again, and then set it on the table so precisely that Davos had to keep himself from nudging it a finger's breadth to square the corners. "So, Ned Stark has finally found his iron." "He has always had it, your grace," Davos said. Stannis glared at him, but without heat. "He weakens himself with scruples, yet here he has done the one thing that must be done." He looked to Cresson. "The city will turn to him. The city will turn to whomever keeps them fed and holds the streets," Cresson said quietly. I have known no place so quick to love and unlove its kings as King's Landing. Hungry dogs love the man with the bone, Stannis said, and tear the man with the stick. I will bring bones and sticks both. Celis leaned forward. It is the Lord's will, she said. Her mouth tightened in what might have been a smile. The Red God has prepared your path. Stannis's jaw set. He made a small motion, and the woman who waited in the inner arch came forth as if an invisible hand had drawn her. Melisandre of Asshai moved like a river at night. A motion, a glint of red, a face and then no face, light and then dark. The ruby at her throat burned with its own heart. Your Grace, she said, and her voice made all the torches seem like small things. The Nig. HT throws up kings of smoke with crowns of ash. Only the fire makes a true one. I will be true, Stannis said. By law, not by fire. The two are not enemies, she said, the rueful smile as surprising on her as warmth in winter. Not always. Davos kept his face careful. His thumb slid over the smoothness of the bone bag hanging on its thong around his neck. For finger bones, polished with much handling. When he was afraid, the bones reminded him that he had paid his due and been forgiven that much. He did not like the Red Woman. He did not like how she moved, how the men changed around her, how even Stannis seemed to sleep less now, and what little sleep he had was like a man watching a door from his bed. But Stannis would go where duty pointed, and Davos did not question that path. Ready the fleet, Stannis said. We sail as soon as wind and tide give leave. Send word to the lords of the Crownlands and to those storm lords who have not run to lick at Renly's pretty hand. Any man who refuses will remember, when I am done, what it is to break faith. You will be crowned there? Celis asked. In the great September with the 7 oils? Or, she said no more. Her eyes flicked to Melisandre. I will be crowned as a king is crowned, Stannis said sharply. By the law, with the 7 oils. I will not begin with insult to the gods of half my kingdom. Melisandre watched him with some expression very much like pleasure and nothing like it, both at once. All gods are one god, she murmured, and Davos decided that if he lived 100 years, he would never be comfortable with the way she looked when she spoke. Cresson set his hand on the table. The tremor that had grown in his body with the passing years made his knuckles quiver as if with cold. He had faced summers and winters and kings and cowards. He thought of a smaller boy with a bigger chin than his body could bear, Stannis yawning at lessons, and then, when attention finally clicked in him like a piece of iron finding its mate, becoming impossible to pull away. This is danger, Cresson said softly, and yet I think it also the only path. There are lions on the roads, and sweet young stags that think themselves kings in Highgarden. Go quickly, go protected. I am protected by my right, Stannis said, and by my sword, and by the memories of men. Men's memories are short, Cresson murmured. The gods remember longer. Men make law, Stannis said, and law makes men, Cresson said. He looked at Davos. Ser Davos, you know the gutters of that city. You know its tongue and its back ways. Tell me how you would take a fleet through the mud gate without letting half of it dangle in the ropes like fish. Davos rubbed at his jaw and found stubble there, and behind the roughness of hair he found the roughness of thought. Quiet, he said, and with torches doused, and with the city already wanting you inside. Lord Stark has shut the gates. He can open them for the right men, but there are unright men who'll try to open them for themselves. We should send word to Bywater, if the Lord Protector trusts him, and to Ser Barristan too. And we should be wary of fire on the water. The alchemists have too many green dreams. Stannis turned his head. Green dreams. Wildfire, Davos said, and the word tasted like bile. The Guild of Alchemists has long wanted to play at dragons. They pour green fire into jars and dream of burning fleets and cities. In the sack, Ares nearly blazed the whole of King's Landing away with the stuff. I would not give any man of King's Landing so much as a slug of wildfire if I were you, your grace. But they may play with it themselves if there is riot. Stannis made a rough sound. Then we will come before the riot. I will not have my city turn into a pyre. By the day Ned sent a second raven, the city's gossip had grown a beard and a limp and a patch over one eye. The tale the small folk told had Joffrey in irons and then in gilded chains and then spirited away dressed as a girl and then smuggled out in a wine cask and then hiding in the sept's rafters. Ned ignored all of it as a man ignores the gnats in summer, batting a hand when they came too near but otherwise letting them buzz. He set the household to order. Vayen Poole kept accounts like a man counting pulses. Desmond Grell and the other northern men drilled in the yard until sweat made steam when they took off their helm and the morning air touched their hair. Syrio Farrell's feet tapped on the stone of Arya's practice yard like rain. Sansa walked with Septa Mordane out in the gardens where the gnarled lemon trees shed pale fruit as softly as tears. He sent men to the Sept to keep the peace. He sent men to the Street of Flower to keep the bakers honest, and to the Street of Silk to keep the bravos from using chaos as a pretext for their theater of blood. He signed orders until his hand ached, and then he curled that hand around a cup of small beer and let it cool. Varys came in as if the door had given birth to him. "Lord Protector," the eunuch said, laying the right amount of silk on each syllable. "I am relieved that we have avoided the worst excesses of disturbance." "We have not avoided them," Ned said. "We have delayed them." Varys spread his hands to concede the point. "As well, I suppose. His Grace sails." "He does," Ned said. "Sir Barristan will manage our house until he comes. You will keep the city's ear. Peter will keep his head on his shoulders if he's very clever." "Yes," Varys said. "If." He leaned a little in, a conspirator whose conspiracies were only gossip and thus a kind of bomb. "May a humble servant of the realm speculate that Lord Tywin does not sleep? The rivers to the west run choked with burned bridges and drowned men. If the king's peace is made iron in King's Landing, it will be broken in the riverlands. Lady Catelyn half saw to that herself," Ned said, and the words lived like splinters in his tongue. "She did it for me. I have sent a raven commanding Lord Tywin to present himself at the city to answer for his depredations." Varys's smile was so thin as to be a line. "Your Grace will find that some men have a genius for deafness." He touched the teardrop at his ear and looked for a moment at Ned, not as if he were a lord or a wolf or a problem, but as if he were a man. "You might send for your son." "I will not bring Robb into this," Ned said. "He must see to the north." "Then he must see to the riverlands," Varys said softly, "because they will call. And you did not bring them to it, my lord, but you are the hook that holds them together. If the Lannisters keep burning, the lords between the Golden Tooth and the Trident will bleed you until you answer. If Lord Tywin comes to King's Landing, he comes with an army. If he does not, he forces you to come to him. He is not a man who allows other men to choose his ground." Ned looked at the map upon the table, its paint worn smooth where many hands had followed the paths of roads and rivers and passes in the mountains. The riverlands lay like a man lying in a field, arms flung wide, the trident a blue ribbon thrown carelessly over his chest. A wolf in the river had always drunk where it pleased. But wolves were few and men many, and now the men wore lions on their chests. "Send to the Eyrie," he said. "Ask Lisa for men. Remind her of her vow to the crown." Varys smiled, the sort of smile a mother might give a child she loves when the child says it will marry the moon. "Of course," he said. He had the High Septon in to speak, a man fat with God, and he listened to the soft cooing about rebellion and sacred vows and the sorrow of sin like stinging rain he would suffer until it passed. He had Pycelle brought in irons and listened to the old man swear and tremble, and he had Lancel Lannister brought too and watched him turn his face to the wall when asked about wine and boars and instructions delivered with a queen's smile. Lancel cried. Ned had not wanted him to cry. He felt his jaw set with a heat that was not anger and not contempt and not pity and was all three. He thought of Arya then, whose eyes had no softness in them and a wildness that made men uncomfortable and made Ned, in some bones-deep way, feel comforted himself. When she came to him, he folded her into his arms and smelled her hair, which smelled like sweat and the metal tang of practiced swords. "I'm doing my water dance," she announced, as only a child could announce. as if the world were a stage for her declaration. Sirio says. Sirio is a good teacher, Ned said. He says the first sword of Bravos never runs, she told him with fierce satisfaction. The first sword of Winterfell knows when to run, Ned said soft, and she made a face. And then they both laughed, and for a heartbeat it was a world with fewer knives in it. Sansa came later with Septa Mordain, and she curtsied and looked at him with her sweet, solemn eyes, and he felt his heart bruise again with that sweet solemnity, as if he could feel the world pushing on that same spot over and over until it would never stop hurting. You have been very brave, he told her, and she told him she had said her prayers, and he thought, brave indeed. Will I still? She swallowed, and the Septa's hand came like a quiet bird to her shoulder. I mean, the betrothal. You will not wed Joffrey, Ned said gently. There will be other matches. I will see you safe. You are my blood. She bowed her head, and tears fell 1, 2, 3 like rain from a roof. She did not sob. He loved her all the more for it, and wished she would scream and throw things and be a child again for 3 breaths. Stannis's fleet came up like a dark wall on the horizon, a bruise against the noon sky. The city saw its sails, and the gulls saw the fish that boiled behind the great hulls, and every man who had once been a sailor leaned on a railing and let out the quiet sound that any man makes when he finds home again at sea. The harbor lasted a long, held-in breath, and then the horns began to shout and flags to spark from towers to piers and back again. The mud gate swung open and then closed with a caution that did not seem excessive to anyone. Stannis stepped off his plank in the black and gold of House Baratheon with only enough flashing to make it clear he did not care for such things. The crown set on the velvet cushion in front of him was the old stag's crown, heavy with antlers. Maester Pycelle's flabby mouth made a small motion when it was brought forth, as though he had meant to speak and forgot what words were. The High Septon's fingers shook only a little with the oil. Stannis knelt and rose and took the crown and had it set on his own head, and when he turned he did not smile. The city seemed to hold itself upright by gripping its own spine very hard. In the sight of gods and men, the High Septon said, I pronounce you king. In the sight of law, Stannis said dryly, and the ripple of laughter that ran across the court was relief more than humor. Men came and knelt. They pledged the words they had pledged before and would pledge again to someone else if fate held its usual way. Ned watched the ones whose eyes went soft and glazed in the presence of a crown, as if kingship made a mist they could breathe. He watched the ones whose eyes stayed hard and true. He watched Littlefinger kneel with beautiful humility, watched Varys kneel with unctuous sincerity, watched Barristan kneel like a tower lowering itself by virtue of gravity rather than will. He knelt last himself and felt the cold floor through the thinness of ceremony. When they rose, the king looked at the queen. Cersei Lannister stood like a statue of some forgotten goddess who had lost her temple and then lost her patience. Her mouth was a thin line, her eyes large and pale. Stannis made a small gesture. Confine her, he said. Send for her confessors. She may have any septon she names, so long. As he speaks more to the gods than to her. And the children? Barristan asked, his voice so careful it seemed to be part of the ceremony. The white cloak turned him statue-like too, and only his eyes were human in their worry. They will be cared for, Stannis said. They will be treated with honor. They are children. He turned to Ned. You have made accusations. The law demands proof. The book, Ned said. The testimony of men formerly in service to the Queen. Maester Pycelle's recall of herbs given and when. The accounts of King Robert's bastards and their coloring. The Queen's cousin's admission. He did not enjoy the naming of Lancel. He did not enjoy any of this. The work of a man who loves law is sometimes the work of a butcher. We will hear it, Stannis said, in full, and then we will sentence. Cersei did not spit. She did not scratch. She looked at them as if they were insects she was memorizing to smear at a later date. She went with her head high. On a spur of rock beside a hidden cove, Davos Seaworth and Melisandre watched the tide come in. Dark water on darker water, the foam a lace of milk thrown over the whole. Above, the city's towers were smudges. Below, the water held its breath in and out like a living thing dreaming. You look at the city as a thief looks at a lock, Melisandre said, amused. I look at it as a man who has carried onions up those steps at night without waking any dogs, Davos said. The city watches itself, and it sleeps hard. You are a cautious man, she said. I am an old smuggler, he corrected. I have learned to count the waves. You will learn to count flames, she said. And he ignored her because argument is air to people like her, and he preferred to breathe something else. That night Stannis held court, not for the sake of show, but to hand down the first of many pieces of law. The King's Guard would be purged, but not humiliated. The City Watch would extend their patrols into the alleys where men were most easily stabbed and lost. The alchemists would be forbidden from mixing wildfire without royal warrant. The guilds were to put out extra lamps in poorer districts, and the crown would reimburse the oil. He gave command of the city's defense not to some lordling with weight in his name and none in his hand, but to Barristan Selmy, and the look that passed between the old knight and the king was something that kept men straighter-backed for an hour afterward. Later, in the quiet where parchment breathes and men must speak softly so as not to wake the law, Stannis and Ned sat across from one another at the council table. You have my thanks? Stannis said at last, very grudgingly, and with that grudging came the sign of sincerity. For once, Winterfell has done something that accords with both law and sense. The law and my sense walk together, Ned said. For now, Stannis muttered. He rubbed his jaw with the back of his knuckles, a hard scrape of skin on stubble. Renly will run to Highgarden. He will paint himself a king and parade before the Tyrell's green boys until they clap for him and call him sweet names. He has gone already, Varys murmured from the shadows, as if he had been invited and perhaps he had. It was always hard to remember when Varys had or had not been invited. I have it from 3 tongues, and one of them still moist with wine taken in his company. He was always a peacock, Stannis said with bitter pride. He will find that feathers do not stop arrows. He looked at Ned. We will need the Riverlands. The Lannisters will not put away their swords because I have put on a crown. We will have them, Ned said. Lady Catelyn is in the Riverlands, Varys finished, helpful as a knife, with her son. Lord Robb Stark has called the banners. Ned's head came up. I did not bid him, and yet boys are born with fire in them, Varys said. Boys named Stark even more so. I will command him to hold to Moat Cailin, Ned said. The Riverlords must be rallied by their own. Tully men will hold Riverrun yet. If they do not, Stannis said, then the crown will hold it for them. He drummed his fingers on the table, then stilled them. The queen is to be judged tomorrow. Then we will send for Lord Tywin's fealty oath again, and again. And when he does not come, we will declare him traitor to the crown. That will give some of the fence-sitters in the west an excuse to wriggle down on the right side. We will give them one if they cannot find it themselves. You speak like a man who has had to make men do right before, Ned said. I kept Storm's End through a siege that would have eaten other men's souls, Stannis said flatly. I fed mine to it so it would not touch the castle. Flicker there, gone. We will have to make new marriages. The crown must be seen to bind houses that can stand. You have daughters. Ned's fingers tightened against the table wood. They are children. Everything is children, Stannis said impatiently. Your sons, your father's sons. What were you when they took your father and brother? Children. We are all children until the world forces our hands. I will not wed your children. My own marriage is a hair shirt that will last my life. But I will find men worthy of your girls when they are old enough. In the meantime, he looked up as Davos stepped in, his face salt-burned and earnest. Well, the harbor is yours, Davos said. Bywater's men keep the piers like a guild. No blade drawn, 2 blades sheathed. The mud gate is shut to anyone you don't name. The alchemists grind their teeth but have obeyed your order. I have spoken to the guildmasters on the Street of Steel. They do not love Lannisters. They do not love any lord, truth be told. But they will make for you. Good, Stannis said. Now tell me how we kill Renly. Ned felt himself go very still. There will be no treacheries, he said. Stannis turned those iron eyes on him. Your honor is a cloak you put on. And even in your sleep, he said. I will not hang you with it. I asked how to defeat him. Starve him, Davos said, as if he meant only what the word said. He will come up the Rose Road with orchards on either side and songs in his men's heads. He will want to bring his green to your black. If he spreads himself like a blanket, he will cover too much and leave holes. If he comes tight as a fist, the fist has to open to eat. Close the gates and let no grain out, and you will turn the city against him, but not too quickly. Mace Tyrell's men eat better than most. Better we make it seem like the gods frown on him. He is the sort that listens to omens when they flatter him. Better? Melisandre breathed, and a strange heat crept into the room as if someone had opened a door to a summer world. Better we remind them whose night it is. No sorcery, Ned said, and his voice cut again. I will not have assassins in the dark. Assassins? Melisandre's smile could have made glass melt. You speak as if shadows choose. Shadows do not choose. They obey. She touched the ruby at her throat. And if the Lord of Light calls a man's shadow home. Enough, Stannis said. He looked between them, the annoyance there, but something else too. If Renly comes to the walls, we will answer him with iron and with words. And if he dies in battle where any man might die. If, Melisandre said, and the word fell soft as ash. In Maegor's holdfast, by a window that looked out on a garden drenched in moonlight, Cersei Lannister saw herself in the glass and smiled very slightly because the woman in the glass did not look conquered. She had told Joffrey stories when he was small, not the stories that made little boys sleep easy, but the ones that so terrified them they had to invent courage inside themselves just to end the listening. She had told him about monsters that wore men's faces and about kings who clutched their crowns with blood-slick hands and about queens who set fires that never went out. She had left out the parts where the queens were the heroes. She wondered now if she had erred. Children learn from stories. The wrong stories make fools or dead men. The Septon put his hands together and murmured. Cersei had chosen him for his narrow mouth and his clever eyes, and because he could be made to think any sin a virtue if the right words were used. He would tell her that she had done wrong, and then he would tell her that the wrong was necessary. You, she said, and then the proper insult rose up like bile. Little wolf. Arya looked at her with a candor that was a blade. My father says the law is the law. And what do you know of law? Cersei purred. I know you don't like it, Arya said bluntly, and I know that kings who don't like law are called something else. Cersei laughed and felt the laugh make her stronger. Run along, she said, and the rare grace fell on her of not saying a thing she might regret. Before I ask them to put you out. In his cell Tyrion Lannister was not, and this was the cause of all sorts of trouble. He watched the sun come up over the mountain's shoulder, and watched the way sunlight made a pale brew with the mist over the vale. Bronn lay like a cat slung out on warm tile, his sword within easy reach. When the guards had told Tyrion that knightly justice had set him free, he had laughed for an hour and then had to sit down before he fell over. Life's mood changes fast enough when you're small. It's a wonder the small do not become philosophers. Your father is at war, Bronn said. The Riverlands. They curse him with their last breath and then their first breath. It's charming. Father would rather fight anyone else's war than his own, if the fighting can be done by other men, Tyrion said. He toyed with a grape until it split in his fingers and left him with meat on skin. The Starks have the city. For now, Bronn said. I aim to make trouble with that for now, Tyrion said. I aim to be a good son. And how does a good son serve a father like yours? Bronn asked. He might have been curious or might have been yawning. With Bronn the two were often the same. By making himself useful, Tyrion said, and by not dying in silly ways. It took him a while to catch an escort that was cheap enough and vicious enough to be his kind of men. By the time he came with the mountain clans to Lord Tywin's murder camp on the Red Fork, the war had already begun to tire of itself. The villages had run out of things that would burn. The old men had run out of breath to beg for the lives of pigs. The children had run out of names they remembered when the soldiers asked them who they were. Tywin Lannister's tent was an exercise in fury held in by fine silk and gold thread. "Joffrey is not king," Tywin said, as if the very syllables were an insult to his mouth. "Stannis sits in King's Landing with a crown on his head, as if it had been molded for that block of stone he calls a skull. Eddard Stark has put himself forward as if he were the conscience of all 7 kingdoms. And Robert is dead." He said the last as an afterthought, as one might remark on the unfortunate sinking of a ship that had outlived its usefulness. "We are not yet at war with the crown, but we are at war with those who would keep us from the crown. That is a distinction with little meaning." His eyes came up. "You are to go to King's Landing. You are to smile and be clever and find the crack. You are to make me a crack if there is none." Tyrion bowed and decided he would try very hard to do this and not die. It had been a long time since the impulse to live had been so strong in him. It might have been the sight of his father's mouth when it said Joffrey's name. Anyone who could make Tywin Lannister's mouth look like that was playing for real stakes. Robb Stark had never thought the wind could taste like victory and sorrow at once. He tasted both as he watched the banners furl over the green rise of the Whispering Wood and felt Grey Wind's breath huff hot against his hip. They had taken the Lannister host there like a surprise in a tale, and the tale had spilled Jaime Lannister into their hands as if he had been an apple in a bag with the bottom rotted out. His mother's face when they had brought the Kingslayer in. Oh, he would remember that until he died. War made stories of men. Mother had looked at Jaime with her dead sons and dead husband in her eyes, and then she had looked at Robb and seen a boy and a lord and did not know which to speak to. "We have him," Theon Greyjoy had crowed, careless as always of who heard him. "By the drowned god's arse, we have him. We have his body," Robb had said, trying for his father's steel and finding only his own iron. "What we do with him is the measure of what sort of men we are. We are the sort that kill their enemies," Theon had said. "We are the sort that know better when a man's death buys us less than his life," Catelyn had answered from the edge, and Theon had had the good sense to grin and go busy himself elsewhere. He had been a ward at Winterfell all Robb's life. He had been a playbrother and a boastmonger, and sometimes both at once. Robb loved him and wanted to cuff him and needed him and could not trust him. That was what love was like when you were a lord. Riverrun's towers caught the late sun and returned it fitfully. The river ran blue-green under the walls, and the catfish nosed the shallows as if they knew men's wars only by the way corpses changed the taste of water. Edmure Tully rode out to meet them with blood on his sleeve and a bandage around his head and that same brave foolishness in his chin. "Sister," he said to Catelyn, and would have embraced her had his horse not danced at the wrong moment. He laughed and made a thing of it because Edmure made things of most things. "Uncle," Robb said to Brynden Blackfish, the man whose counsel he had learned to call for when his own wanted dressing. The Blackfish nodded once, and looked at the hostage they brought with a professional interest. "Jaime Lannister the Kingslayer," Catelyn said. "A prize." "A problem," Brynden corrected softly. Robb wrote to his father that night by candle and wished the letter could be a voice. He told Lord Stark of their victory and their dead. He told him of the men who would follow to hell if commanded and of the ones who needed their pay counted out in front of them on a drum. He told him of whisperings about the neck and what the Freys wanted and how Walder Frey's eyes were like puddles you could drown in even if you could stand up in them. He did not tell him that sometimes he woke with his mouth dry and could not remember the names of 2 boys he had seen die that morning. He sealed it and sent it, and Grey Wind got up from the foot of the bed and shook himself and came to lay his head on Robb's knee, and Robb put his hand in the thick gray pelt and imagined he could feel his father's heart beating there. In the morning Cersei Lannister was not contrite. She was contempt. She let them throw down their words like dice. She watched the High Septon sweat through perfunctory prayers. She listened to the recitation of the small folks' names and shrugged. When Pycelle stammered over numbers, she rolled her eyes. When Lancel sobbed, something like weariness crossed her face, and it was the only true thing they had from her that day. "You did this," she said to Ned when they gave her the chance to speak. "You did this because you think the world is a book and you are the man to read it to us and tell us what we are in it. You are wrong. The world is a pit full of snakes. We are the ones who do not get bitten. We are the ones who learn how to bite. You bit a brother, Stannis said, and if there was disgust there, it was not for the sin but for the weakness it implied. And made bastards of your children. They are my children, she said, as if to deliver them back to herself with the force of saying. And I made them kings. You made one a dead boy if you'd had your way, Barristan Selmy said quietly. The day you sent his father hunting with a wineskin heavy enough to drop a boar. She did not blink. Prove it, she said. We will, Ned said. But first, we will pass sentence on what we know. Stannis's justice fell like an axe, clean. Cersei was to be confined for life in a remote holdfast. Her name struck from the rolls, her lands reverted. Lancel would take the black and be gone to the wall before sunset. Pycelle would be stripped of chain and sent to take vows as a begging brother. The children would be housed with honor the Red keep under the eye of the Kingsguard until they were of age. They would have no rank beyond what their bastardy allowed and would be permitted to choose their lives when they were grown. Joffrey protested. Joffrey cursed. Joffrey cried. In the end, he looked like a boy. Ned watched his face and saw there the outline of the man that face would have made. Comforted him in no way. Sansa stood behind a colonnade and watched with her hands twisting each other until the knuckles were white. Arya had to be kept from throwing a shoe. The Stark girls were Winterfell both, and Winterfell was not known for quiet, except when the quiet was snow-deep and soundless as death. Renly Baratheon's tent was a green cathedral older than most men's gods. The silk of it a thing of worship for the hands that had made it. He held court within in the presence of his peach-eating followers, as if he had always been king and the word had only just caught up to him. Loras Tyrell was a bright blade beside him, and when he smiled, men found that they had always wanted to smile with him. Mace Tyrell swaggered and boomed and set things down on maps that were only set down because his finger was fat enough to cover the space. I am loved, Renly said, and believed that this was the same as being a king. You are popular, Loras corrected, faintly amused. It is not the same thing. It is the thing that feeds the other, Renly replied. Stannis will have law. I will have love. Stannis will have the city, Garland Tyrell said from the shadows, reasonable as bread. And I will have its heart, Renly murmured. He will guard its walls and I will sing in its halls. One of us will tire first. If you go to the walls, you will have arrows, Loras said. Let him come to you. Let him starve for your favor. Renly grinned and flung himself down on a cushion. You only want to keep me from danger, so you can keep me to yourself. Loras's smile thinned. I want you to be king. That requires you to be alive. Men die, Renly said airily. Kings die to make room for new kings. Not if I can help it, Loras said. His hand lay companionably close to the hilt of his sword, and his thumb stroked the guard absently, as if it were a lover. Renly's eyes softened, then sharpened. He was learning the shape of kingship as a child learns to stand. Giddy when upright, bruised when down. The encampment spread in the fields like flowers in mud. The Tyrells introduced their perfume to the air, and the Storm Lords their thunder and clamor. The small folk went wild for the pageants and went hungrier for their bread. News came up the Rose Road and along the Mander and from more disreputable places where rumors were born in fumes and lies. Stannis has chained the harbor, one man said. Eddard Stark has declared that lions are goats and goats are lions, said another. A dragon has been born in the east, whispered a woman who had the leaf behind her ear that meant she was mad, or a witch, or someone with a story. Renly laughed at some of it and ignored the rest. He sent letters to Storm's End and Brightwater Keep in Old Town and Harrenhal and got back what men always got back. Promises, evasion, threats, praise, abuse, silence. He set passages in motion that might have been plans if the world were a cleaner place and not as it was, full of men who changed their minds as readily as their shirts. On a night when the moon made the banners pale with silver and the tents became a forest of ghost grass, a man slipped into Renly's pavilion who had no business there. Davos rowed him in a small skiff up the mouth of the Rush and through a cut known to 3 men and their dead. His oars were wrapped in cloth. His lantern was hooded and then dead. He had told the king he hated this errand. The king had told him to do it. Davos's finger bones were smooth where his own nerves were not. "What do you want?" Renly said, irritated, when the figure stood on his rugs as if they had been a beach at low tide. The figure's hair was an odd color in that light, neither red nor shadow, but something that caught both and made them fight. "If you are a supplicant, you will wait." Melisandre moved forward and her feet did not make a sound. "I bring you a kindness," she said. "I have too much kindness already," Renly drawled, and then his face changed, because the thing that uncoiled from the woman's shadow was not a kindness and was not a thing. Davos had seen many things crawl out of barrels and knots and wrecks, and he had seen dead men on ropes and the way the sea could make a man small. He had never seen anything like that shadow. It did not move so much as become movement, and the knife in its hand was like the part of running that is the point between feet touching ground where a man is most himself, weightless and inevitable. Renly reached for his sword and found that it had a shadow too, and the two shadows kissed. Then the shadow cut his throat. Time turned in on itself like the moment in a storm when the wind changes sides of the house, and for a handful of heartbeats you can hear nothing but your own breath. When it turned back, the women screamed. Loras Tyrell made a sound that was no sound, like a harpstring cut but after the last note. He went for the woman in red and would have killed her if the shadow had left anything but a trace on the carpet. Davos was running before he knew he had planned to run. He had the skiff to find, and the oars, and the river, and a pit of guilt inside him that would not fill with any blessing he had ever believed in. Stannis would have his victory. Davos hoped he choked on it. In the morning, all the bright tints were no longer bright. The green had gone from the Tyrell's eyes. Mace bellowed and blustered and would have struck Ned Stark down with his bare hands if he could have reached him across the field and the wall and the water and the law. Loras stood before the great September like a statue that had ebbed and hardened again with the salt in its own tears. He asked for justice and received a promise of inquiry, and it made him colder than if he had been refused out of hand. "Renly Baratheon died in his bed," Stannis said, and his voice carried the weight of something he had convinced himself was true. "We make no law that can keep any man from such death." His eyes flicked to Ned as if he wanted him to object, to be that iron bar again, and then to give way. Ned did not and did not. Barristan Selmy handled the Tyrells with the grace that had kept kings alive for decades. He delivered Stannis's regret with a dignity that made every insult seem like an accident of fate. He offered a courteous request for terms, a path by which the Tyrells might back out of the whole affair with honor mostly intact. Mace seized on it in the way a drowning man would seize on a plank he decided afterward had always been a ship. Garland counseled it. Willis sent a raven counseled it too. Loras stood unmoving as a place where lightning had struck and considered whether he would use honor as a blade or as a scabbard. In the end, it was the living who decide for the dead. The Tyrell host took the Rose Road back west. The small folk watched them go with a confusion that sounded like laughter until you listened closely. "Now," Stannis said, breathing at last. "Now Tywin." Tywin Lannister sat in a room that had once been a river hall full of feasts and now smelled of thick smoke and horse. He sat with a cup of wine in front of him and did not reach for it and did not have to say any part of his displeasure out loud. Kevin was there. The cousins were there. Jaime was not there. Tywin's mouth mentioned that to itself, practicing how it would speak it when it took it out later and used it like a spur. "Renly is dead," Tywin said. "How?" "No one seems to know," Kevin said, in the voice he used when he did not want to say all of the things he knew. "Some say sorcery. Some say an assassin. Some say nothing at all and hope they will keep living if they keep their mouths shut. The Tyrells are going home." "Cowards," Tywin said. "Pragmatists," Tyrion offered, and because he did not wish to die today, he made the word mild. "Pragmatists live to breed cowards." Tywin flicked a glance at him. "You will go to King's Landing," he said again. "Eddard Stark will not be bought. Stannis cannot be frightened. But men around them can be tempted and spooked and softened. There is soft flesh even on a wolf somewhere. Find it. There are cracks in every stone. Find them. I will keep the riverlands hot. They cannot fight me and fight Stannis both. They can, Tyrion said. They will bleed for it, but it will be interesting. He lifted his cup and drank to the word. On the wall the wind drew long, fine knives along the edge of the world. Jon Snow stood with his gloved hands on cold stone and looked north into the white-blue distance that made men feel small in a way that was good for them. Ghost stood with him, red eyes not blinking, for a banner of pale. "Your father is alive," Samwell Tarly whispered, as if that might keep death from hearing and getting ideas. "He is the hand again, or the hand's hand?" "He is the law in the city," Jon said. The words were like a fire in him, and he could not decide if the warmth was comfort or the sort that draws men out onto thin ice. "He's set a king who belongs and taken down one who does not." "That's a lot of setting and taking," Sam said nervously. "Isn't it?" He wrapped his arms around himself and tried to pull his own warmth up out of his belly. "I wish someone would set a fire here. I wish I could take a warm bath." Jon laughed despite himself, and then he sobered. "I wish he'd come back to the north." Sam made a small surprised bird sound. "To Winterfell?" "To Winterfell," Jon said. "And then the north would remember itself and I would what? Nothing. I would do my duty. Lord Mormont says the dead walk and the wildlings are moving and the others are." He did not finish it. The stories did not need finishing. They finished themselves. What happens there matters less than what happens here, even if it feels the other way round. Sam bobbed his head. "It always feels the other way round," he said. "There are more people there to feel. In King's Landing, there were always more people to feel. They felt bread go dear and beer go dearer and felt their girls grow coarser in the streets and their boys grow sharper with knives. They felt the crown take some of their misery and send back just enough relief to keep them alive. They felt the shape of kingship change in the air, the taste of it like rain before a storm. They felt the rumor of dragons and laughed and shivered and laughed again. They felt the peace under Barristan Selmy's patrols like a net that held them not uncomfortably, but still held. They felt the Lannisters' jaws unclench around their throats. They felt another set of teeth touch there, the new and lawful and unfamiliar. They did not mind its bite so long as it bit also men they hated. Sansa Stark learned to walk the lanes where the gardeners made their gardens in buckets and the seamstresses stitched by windows open to gather light. She learned to wear her cloak not like a lady from the north blundering into spring, but like one who had a right to be comfortable in any weather. She learned that singers could be bribed to sing certain songs in certain places at certain hours. She learned she no longer loved songs as she had before. She learned other songs. The weight of silence, the sound men made when they wanted to be heard in power, the way women made themselves heard by speaking softer or by not speaking at all. Arya learned more of the water dance and learned more of the city's other dances. She trailed Bywater's men once and found them beating a man in an alley until he looked like meat. She trailed Varys once and lost him when the wall he walked by seemed to fold in on his shadow like a mouth swallowing a name. She trailed Littlefinger and then stopped because she did not like how it made her feel about knives. "First lesson," Syrio said, "fear cuts deeper than swords." "Second lesson," Arya retorted, grinning, the sweat on her lip briny and good, "do not stab your teacher even when he talks like that." Syrio laughed. "The third will come soon," he said, and then he had her off her feet with one flick of his wrist and she was on her back and laughing too. The air knocked out of her, the sky white and high. The river carried armies like ants on sticks. Ned read the reports and made the lines in his head that meant something like a plan. Stannis marched not at all. He sent men under steadier hands. He kept the city the way a man keeps a hearth. He received the phrase and listened to their bargains and gave them a small one and a stern look. He told the Riverlords they were in rebellion against a traitor and must come and submit themselves. And when they did not submit, he forgave and fumed in equal measure. He tried to be a king like law wanted. It wore him like a saddle and rubbed him raw. Renly would have given them a fair, he said once, with a bitterness that might have been envy if anything of that sort could have thrived in him. They would have loved him for a year, Ned said. I would have ruled them for 40, Stannis said. Rule is not love, Ned said. No, Stannis said. It is not. His mouth did a thing then that was not quite a smile and not quite its opposite. You and I will never agree on this, but we will agree on Tyrion Lannister. He is coming. Good, Ned said. I will have someone to dislike that I can say so out loud. When Tyrion came with a handful of sellswords and 3 carts of what he claimed were gifts from his father, he brought with him jokes like breadcrumbs to show his path into the city and out again if the need came. He made everyone laugh he needed to laugh and made no one laugh he needed to fear him, and after a day Ned had to admit the man did his father's work better than his father might have done it in plain sight. Lord Stark, Tyrion said, bowing very deeply, mockery cut so fine it could be confusion. The last time we met my sister took me prisoner for being short. She should have taken you for being a Lannister, Ned said. Tyrion smiled. We are guilty of many things, he said. That one we cannot help. He spread his hands. I am here to make peace, or at least, to make such a war as is tolerable to men who must live after it. There is no peace that leaves men like your father free to do as they will with small folk, Ned said. There is no war that will stop men like my father from doing as they will with small folk, Tyrion returned, and for a heartbeat they were 2 tired men hearing a tired truth. Let us be honest. The city cannot fight forever. The Riverlands cannot burn forever. You have a king who believes himself right. I have a father who believes himself the only competent man in 3 kingdoms. Between them is not so much room as a rabbit might wriggle through, and yet I have wriggled, and here I am. What do you want? Ned asked. To be alive, Tyrion said. He looked at him, his eyes suddenly unguarded, and Ned saw there a boy's desire not to be thrown away by his father. It made him pity him an inch, and then he remembered Jory's blood on cobbles. The inch hardened to a line. From you, Tyrion went on. I want the law you love so much. I want it to find a way to let lions keep their pride without chewing the realm to bones. From Stannis, I want an understanding that wolves can leave lions their teeth, so long as they use them to bite someone else. You want me to let your father keep the West, Ned said. You want Stannis to forgive on the condition that you go burn someone else's countryside. To your own side. Put so plainly it sounds indecent. You should be a bard. I am a Stark, Ned said. How dull for you, Tyrion murmured. Well, I said my piece. The king will spit it out. You will throw bones to it. By the time we finish, the small folk will have died in numbers enough to make a sermon. It will be like any other season of politics. When he was gone, Stannis said, I will hang him. As casually as one might say, I will take bread at noon. You will not, Ned said. He speaks treason, but he speaks as a messenger. Hang him, and the whole city will say you fear words. I do not, Stannis said, and the anger there was not at Ned but at the fact that he had to say the words. I fear the next thing that will come from the mouth those words came from. I fear the day when we are the only mouths left talking, Ned said, and Stannis stared at him as if he were a tree that had said something interesting about the sky. On a day thick with heat, the first omen of dragons came to Varys in the shape of a whisper with ashes on it. A girl, he said in his best gentle tone. In the east. 3. They say the eggs hatched. Stannis snorted. They say. Varys said, unflappable. They say many things. I keep the ones that continue to be said a week later, and this one keeps on. Let us not burn our own house, Ned said, running about looking at the smoke of another whole world away. The world is closer every day, Varys said, and smiled with an innocence that could not be. But I agree. She learned to be invisible when she wanted and a nuisance when he did not. She watched Sansa learning not to betray herself when she blushed. She watched her father stand in the throne room with Stannis and watched men bring them problems like offerings to a shrine and watched them give back solutions like barbed gifts. She watched them grow thinner. Cersei Lannister made no attempt to flee, and from that Ned gleaned a fraction of what made her dangerous. Once late he went to see her. It was the sort of mistake men make when they are tired. She was embroidering, and the picture she made was of a lion devouring a stag. But the stag had 9 heads. She did not stand. She did not essay a smile. "Do you think yourself a good man?" she asked him. "Do you wake in the night when the wind is like a child crying and tell yourself that it is only the wind? Or do you think it is the sound of all the things you have done wrong and angering something in you that still knows right?" He did not answer. "You could have been happy," she said, her needle diving, rising. "You could have given my brother back to me, and I would have given you this city like a toy. I would have let you play at Law and Duty and made sure your name went down in the books they keep in the Citadel and the songs boys sing in the yard at evening. You could have had a little honor and a great deal of pleasure. Instead you have this, a hard bed and a harder throne to lean your back against. Who will write songs for you when you are ashes?" "I did not come for your philosophy," he said. "Then you have less than I would have given you?" she returned, and the needle rose and fell, and the stag's blood spread across the cloth with thread that caught light like metal. Tywin pushed his armies and pulled them and made them do the thing he had made armies do all his life: make coin for him out of the blood of men whose names he never learned. In the Riverlands, the songs took on a new bitterness. The nights in villages were quieter because the wolves had grown interested in carrion, and the women had grown interested in keeping their children near. Robb Stark kept winning and kept not winning enough. A letter came from Walder Frey that might as well have been written on a snake's skin. Catelyn sat with her son and told him the old stories again, of how the twins were gateways and gatekeepers, and how bridges own men as surely as men own bridges. "We need them," Robb said. "We always need those we would rather do without," Catelyn said. "That is the world's favorite lesson." "Father will break Tywin," Robb said fiercely, like a boy who needs the sound of his own certainty. "He will break him against the law. Men like Tywin only break against one thing," Brynden said from the shadows. "Time. Time kills all kings. And some kings help it along." Catelyn closed her eyes. She saw Sansa's face and Arya's and Bran's and Rickon's, and Robb's sitting right there, and Jon's where it would be in her mind whether she wanted it or not. She saw Eddard's face. She made a prayer that had less to do with gods than with memory. The gods did not answer. The memory did. She went to the twins and bent her neck just enough. In King's Landing, Stannis sent a raven to Winterfell. Said only, "Remember," and beneath in a different hand, "Come if you are called." Ned read it and smiled and put it in a place where he put the rare things he would not lose, and then he went back to work. Winter was still a rumor, walled up behind blue on the northern horizon. Snow fell now and then in flakes that melted where they lit. The city had not seen a winter worth naming in many years. The baker's boys tossed white handfuls at one another in alleys, and the girls squealed and then threw some too and afterward told their mothers it had been the boys. The old men felt the ache in their bones and said things about how the last great winter had been. Everyone else just went on, because that is what people do while the world rearranges itself over their heads. Stannis grew more king and not more happy. Ned grew more law and not more content. Varys unfolded plan after plan that looked like flowers and smelled like rot, and Baelish glided through them and left each with fewer petals. Barristan Selmy was younger in his honor than most men's sons. Sansa learned how to say no without moving her lips. Arya learned how to put her blade where it would make a man stop wanting to hold a blade at all. Davos visited his sons and found that kingship had turned him into someone they admired and disliked, and he held both with a fisherman's hands, careful, knowing both could slip. On a summer noon, the first news of Balon Greyjoy's dreams came up the King's Road on the smell of the sea. Ned looked at the letter. Stannis laughed, unkindly and with a sort of joy that had been sharpened by too much lack of joy. "They come like carrion crows when they smell old blood," he said. "They come like men of the sea when the land is confused," Ned said. "Send to the Manderleys. Send to the Glovers. Tell Moat Cailin to be ready to catch raiders like fish in the shallows." "I will," Stannis said, and did. And in that manner the realm did not break in that place yet. It would find other places to try. In the end, Ned thought often of the night he had stepped into the throne room with a parchment that had the weight of a dead king's breath on it. He thought of the Queen's laugh and the will of men who had decided themselves the gods' instruments. He thought of the law. He thought of his father's bones. He thought of the way his daughter's hands felt in his. He thought of Winterfell, and sometimes the thoughts made him so cold inside that he wrapped his cloak tighter and the warmth did not come. He thought of the lie he could have told and the lie he had not told and the lie he could never tell. He thought of the godswood and of a tree that never asked anyone to love it. He thought of snow. He thought of the Iron Throne and how it pricked the back so. Men who leaned on it even when those men were right. Stannis thought of justice and how it was a fire that men crowded. Some warmed their hands. Some burned. He thought of Renly and did not speak his name. He thought of dragons and called them lies. The lies grew new legs. He thought of a red woman and thanked her for nothing and everything. He thought, sometimes, of a boy he had once been who believed that the world would be his if he studied hard enough and hated soft enough. They both kept the city, together as men who would never be friends keep a thing that would be broken if one took his hands away. The news from the north kept coming like the sound of a winter that would not take no. The news from the river kept flowing like all rivers into a sea that men did not like to think about because it was too big for any man's ship. The small folk counted their coins and their children and made songs. Some were about Ned. Some were about Stannis. Some were about both, and those were uneasy songs, not easily sung. And when they were done they left the singer looking at his own hands as if they were suddenly unfamiliar. When winter finally came down the King's Road, it came like sleep after sickness, heavy and irresistible. But that was not yet. For now there were gates to be watched and laws to be held and a throne to stand in front of rather than sit. On a night cold enough to make men honest, Ned Stark stood on the parapet and looked out at a city that had not burned and would burn someday, and he felt the quiet lift through him like breath. Barristan Selmy came and stood beside him, and they said nothing for a while, because there are things men can only say after silence. "You saved them," Barristan said eventually, "from one kind of fire, and led them toward another," Ned said. "That is how saving works." "You chose," Barristan said. "I chose," Ned said. "We will keep choosing until we cannot. Then we will be judged," Barristan said. "We are judged every day," Ned said, "by how a man looks at his daughter, by whether a baker cheats a widow, by what the law says when it speaks and by what we do when we hear it." He looked east and felt a wind that had crossed 1,000 strange roofs. "We are judged by whether we stand in the cold and call ourselves warm men, or go in and put more wood on the fire." In a room below them Stannis Baratheon signed a writ with a hand that had known swords and paddles and rings, and the wax cooled with the seal of a king. In a room beyond that Sansa and Arya lay side by side for the first time since Winterfell and did not sleep, but let their breathing teach the other how to live in a place where one could be at once safe and in danger. In a ship far out on dark water a girl with dragons breathed, and the world breathed back. The city turned in its sleep like a man who dreams and cannot wake, and the bells did not ring, and the weirwoods of the Seven Kingdoms stood, and the wall stood, and winter was coming, and law was a fire men warmed their hands at until it took them to, and then they cast more wood on.